Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. So, I know everyone thought I was going to do the Prophecies Begins ramble next, and I am still planning to do that eventually, but I took it too long, and so a new book came out. I know I don't really do videos on like super new books. I've done it a couple times, but at least when it comes to the main series, I haven't done it. But the Rise of Scourge manga color edition just recently came out, like last week by the time this goes up. So I thought, I'll make a video on it. And even though this is an old video, I haven't actually done a ramble on the original book, because I was honestly a little waiting for the colorized version, and oh boy, I have thoughts. In fact, actually rereading this book was actually very interesting, because, I don't know if you know this, The Rise of Scourge is one of our only pieces of Warrior Cats media solely focused on a villain, on an antagonist. I think the only other ones we have officially are Tiger Claws and Maple Shade's novella. Like, they have novellas, but aside from that, we have never had like one like this. I don't know if you like say, oh, what about Clear Sky? Clear Sky is in a weird position where the only book where he's really an antagonist, he's barely in it. So it's kind of up for debate whether or not he truly counts as a villainous character, as opposed to like an antagonistic character. But let's talk about The Rise of Scourge. I actually have it in my hand so I get like a reference. And I gotta say, first off, the art style. So the art was done by the lovely Benita M. Kurakowski. Sorry if I butchered that name. But this is one of the unique art styles. So everyone knows that James Barry is the primary art style. He did the primary art for the Warrior Cats manga graphic novels. But also, back in the early days, we also had two different other art styles. Tiger Star and Sasha, which, maybe I'll do a video on one day. They also have a unique art style, and this one too. In fact, I can confidently say, out of everything, this one looks the closest to a manga style. Like, obviously, they called the Warrior Cats book, manga, even though none of them were really drawn by manga artists. But this one is, like, the closest, and I'm saying closest, like, very broadly. But I do really like the art style, and a colorized version, which I have been hoping for ever since the originals got recolored. The fact we finally got one is incredible. So let's start off with the plot. So this, of course, as I said, is essentially the origin story for Scourge, the final villain in the Arc 1, who's introduced in Book 6. In this book, he's introduced as Tiny. And, he's with his siblings in a house, very lovely. Their mother's watching over him. They kind of berate his siblings for bullying him because he's called Tiny, and he is really tiny. He's the runt of a litter, essentially. So, kind of one of those stories. And she kind of tells them stories about the fearsome cats in the woods, stuff like that. And we also see that, like, he's very fascinated by these stories. He's like, ooh, the woods, fascinating. He's like, very much interested in the woods. He has that kind of like spark of the wild into it, which becomes apparent when we find out that his father is Jake. And in the original version, you couldn't really tell this very well because it was black and white, but in this version, you can see that his father, who they don't really name here, he explicitly looks like Firestar. He has ginger pelt, green eyes, kind of pattern. So it kind of gets the idea across better that maybe they're related, which, if you know Warrior Cats, you know that they're half-brothers. There's Scourge and Firestar, which kind of recontextualizes their fight, but honestly doesn't really matter too terribly much. So, we also have a scene where, like, they're bullying his Tiny, he's kind of sad, and so he decides to go into the woods, to explore a bit. And he does, he goes around, he explores a bit, he, like, does a little hunting, stands on a tree stump, gets scared, and, goes home. He tells them their story, and ultimately, he kind of, like, they don't believe him, which, fair. But it also gets to the point where his siblings are told by their mother that they're going to get, like, adopted, probably, and they need to present themselves in the best light. What's interesting is that his mother doesn't really prepare Tiny for that. He doesn't really ever broach the idea. His siblings also tell him that cats that don't get, or like kittens specifically, that don't get like adopted, get thrown to the river and drown. His siblings are mean. Little, kind of tropey, but, it's alright. So then later, we see that, he decides, you know what, I'll run away from home, because I don't like them. So he runs away, goes into the forest, he kind of like, he's a kitten, he kind of messes around, until he meets 3 cats. Tiger Paw, Blue Fur, and Thistleclaw. A.k.a. this is just the scene from a different perspective of the Blue Star Super Edition, which I'm not gonna look up the dates, but I'm pretty sure this book did come out around the time that one did, so it kind of makes sense that they would have a little crossover. This is much more of a subtle crossover than the first Super Edition had, whereas that was released around the same time as the site was, and they had like very explicit crossover. This is a bit more subtle. Anyway, I also want to say, in regards to Thistleclaw, I think this is some of our first like official art of him in terms of like showing his coloration, and I really like it. I like how they get the idea across. Like yeah, that's Thistleclaw. Also, the fact that like Tiger Paw, his apprentice, just looks like this bulking cat, even though he's supposed to be like an apprentice. Again, it gets the idea across that yeah, apprentices are not small cats. They are like almost fully grown, and by this point in the timeline, he is basically a fully grown cat. And he just wrecks him. So Thistleclaw 6, Tiger Paw on Tiny. He just wrecks him. It's this really horrifying scene. Blue Fur does stop it. He's like says, "It's enough. We should go home," and they do. They go home. And Tiny, of course, is very sad. He doesn't want to go home because he doesn't want to die in the river. And there's that. So he eventually goes to the city. He fights for scraps. He tries to try to coexist, and as part of that, he wants to like get rid of his collar. Like he has a conversation with some of the rogue cats, and he's like, yeah, I can't have this collar, they'll see me as weak, as a weakling. And so he tries to get it like bitten off. Like he tries to get his collar taken off by a dog. He finds a dog tooth and tries to like cut it off like with a knife. I don't know if he thought it was gonna work. So it then gets stuck in his collar, and he's kind of annoyed by it. He has, again, very expressive. Again, I kind of mentioned it earlier with the art style, but this art style is amazing because they're so incredibly expressive. No shade to James Barry. His art style is good. He has really good telling, in like kind of conveying stuff visually in terms of like the story. But this is just so expressive, so visceral. It's amazing. It's really good. A little sad that we didn't get more of this art style in other media. So he then kind of lies to some rogue cats that the tooth that is on his collar he got from killing a dog. And they kind of believe him, but they don't really believe him. So they decided to put it to the test. They ask him to go get rid of a dog that's been hurting them. Like they kind of been like taking over their territory. So he goes to fight it, and it's, this huge dog, and he's kind of like unsure. He kind of thinks about it. He's like, he methodically plans it out. This, again, subtly, I don't think this was the intention, but if it was, that's pretty cool. It shows that, like his half-brother, Firestar, he very methodically plans things out. He takes kind of account of everything. He plans things out. He's like, you know what? Screw it. I'm just going to go crazy and fight it. So ultimately, he does go try to fight the dog, and he actually scares off the dog. And as he discovers that the dog is not afraid of him, but his shadow, which appears quite huge. And so he scares the dog off. And this kind of tricks the rest of the rogue cats that he managed to actually get those to scare that dog away. Obviously, he didn't kill it, which would be more effective, but fear is a power. Fear and lies and manipulation are very powerful, and this book truly shows that Scourge, while not physically strong, is mentally very strong. He can manipulate any situation, which, is quite fascinating for a villain. And honestly, it is a bit of a contrast to Tiger Star, who is more of a, yes, he is manipulative, but he's more of a physical threat rather than like a, internal threat, something like that. So yeah. But after all of this, he also declares that his name isn't Tiny, because he never told anyone his name. He declares his name is Scourge. Or Scourge. Yeah, it's Scourge. Sorry. The name's weird. But he calls himself Scourge. The reason being, I didn't mention earlier, but his mother calls the cats of the forest a scourge on the name of good cats. And, he's not a good cat, so he's a scourge. Throughout all this, there's time jumps. They don't really make it super explicit there's time jumps, but there are time jumps. He just kind of says that, like, he wants revenge on Tiger Paw, or, like, he doesn't really know his name specifically. But yeah, he wants revenge. He wants to beat him and kill him, and, you know, just wants revenge. But yeah, so we eventually see that he kind of, like, realizes that, yeah, people are leaving the tribute to him, like, they're leaving food, and they're, like, kind of fearful of him. They respect him, not like a good way, but like oh, he might kill us if we cross him. And he's like, you know what? I like this. Let's use it. And so he uses it. He kind of acts as like their kind of sort of leader. They bring his problems to him. He solves their problems. And he actually kind of says that, like, on all of their problems are kind of, like, dumb. Like, he just uses common sense to help, like, protect them. Or just, like, stand up for themselves. So honestly, he's like, yeah, this isn't really, like, terrible. Like, he does kind of think they're all, like, idiots, which in a way they kind of are, but, you know, he's a bit rude about it. So then, you know, we have an instance where, again, huge flash forward, huge jump in time, and we see the Shadow Clan rogues. This is around the time Arc 1 is happening, where the Shadow Clan rogues, driven out, are now in the two-leg place. And, you know, he never seen them before. Again, the specific cats aren't terribly important, although I think Blackfoot is there. And so he then says, you know what, I will fight you, and I will throw you out. They laugh at him because he's still tiny. Like, even after all these moons, he's still incredibly short, which is kind of funny. But yeah, they kind of laugh it off, and then he decides to cut someone's throat. Like, literally, he just slashes one of the rogues' throats. Now, in Black and White, the original one, this was a terrifying scene, but, like, there wasn't color to, like, really show what was happening. Now it's in color, and we can see the blood, and it's a pretty metal scene. So, like, on page 69, of course on 69, like, I'm just not making a joke, it's literally on this page. The middle picture is just, he literally slashes a cat's throat, and it's choking, and it dies. He, like, chokes on his own blood, and it's truly a, like, really visceral scene. And he kind of, like, says, you know what? I haven't really had to do this before. Like, he hasn't really had to kill a cat. Like, it's implied that he hasn't really had to kill anyone yet. But the way that he's done this, and you know what he does? He disrespects the body. He's like, you know what? Screw it. I'm gonna be this icy guy. I don't want to say, like, he wants to be an icy bitch. Like, he just wants to, like, do what he wants and get away with it and be this evil guy. And also around this time that, like, he starts adding more, like, claws to his collar, to his, like, normal claws. Like, he becomes more and more terrifying. And then his siblings show up. Like, his siblings, I didn't really mention them because they're not terribly important. They show up. Apparently, their two legs moved away after they were adopted and abandoned them, which is not nice, but, you know, you could say they maybe deserved it. They're really weak. Like, they look very gaunt and very underfed, and it's a little sad, honestly. Like, it really shows the physicality of these cats. Like, either they're really bulky and well fed, or they're really, like, starving and, like, weak. This art style and book really gets that idea across. Like, the two-leg place is not a great place to be for, like, stray cats. It's honestly kind of sad. But yeah, he does let them eat a bit of food, and then he does kick them out. Like, he throws them out. Also, on this page, he does kind of call them Blood Clan. This is one of the things the book doesn't really ever address, is why he decided to choose the name Blood Clan. Granted, it's not like it's the most mind-blowing reason, like, it's not the most important thing to the narrative, but it's a little strange, because as far as we are aware, even with this origin story, we never find out that he figures out they're called clans, or at least enough knowledge to really ascertain why he wants to call it Blood Clan. Which, you know, is disappointing, but that's not really the point of the book. We then have many, many moons later, and the time has come. We're now in book 6. This is when Tiger Star, who does not remember him, he does not remember that he beat up his apprentice all those years ago, which, I mean, in a way it's fair. That was many, many moons ago, many years ago in some cases. And, well, he's, you know, Tiger Star obviously throws shade at him, but Scourge remembers him. He's like, oh, I know you. He doesn't tell him that he knows him, but he's like, oh, I know him. I can never forget that face. And, he agrees. He agrees to come and help him to, take back the forest and, split the territory. And Scourge is, you know what? I'm going to kill him. I don't care. I'm going to absolutely destroy him. And then the final part of the book is, a version of the fight that we see from book 6, The Darkest Hour. And it's brutal. On page 81, again, now that we're in color, we can see blood. And he kills Tiger Star. And there's blood. Obviously, not as much blood as, the James Barrie graphic novels of later, but still, enough that you're like, oh, dang. And the final scene of the book, which, bit edgy, he basically said that he's won. His litter mates were weak, his family was weak, he's become strong, he's defeated Tiger Star, and the final shot is him, I'm not joking, standing over Tiger Star's body. He's literally standing over his body, red background, fierce cat, saying that, and his final line is, I have won. Oh my gosh. So yeah, that was The Rise of Scourge. Honestly, for a villain that I have very conflicted feelings about, I think a lot of people have conflicted feelings about, because, he is kind of a random villain. His origin story, essentially, was rather fascinating, and honestly, wasn't kind of expected. If you kind of read the books about Scourge first, Scourge, and then read this, you wouldn't be terribly surprised by all this happening. I think the only real things that are, really surprising are, one, the fact that his father is Jake, making him a half-brother of Firestar, which, as I said, it recontextualizes their fight, kind of, because neither of them know this. So it's it's interesting, but not important. And of course, his whole thing with Tiger Star. In the original books, obviously, it was portrayed as he's angry by being bossed around and just doesn't want to take Tiger Star's, essentially the whole deal. But in this book, it's recontextualized as a revenge. He wants revenge. Part of this whole thing was to get revenge on Tiger Star. And here's the thing, it could ruin the story. It really could have. But I don't think it does. Because there are many moments where, like I said, when he kills someone, or when he controls cats, or he becomes feared and respected, he doesn't shy away from it. He's like, dang, I like this. I enjoy this. I want to embrace this. Not for the explicit reason of taking revenge, but he realizes that because he enjoys these things, he can utilize them to take revenge. They are not the driving force of his revenge. They are something that coincidentally can help him, which I think is really fascinating and an interesting direction to take the story. In fact, I'm going to read a little excerpt here, or a little bit of it. There's actually the intro to the story. None of the other books have this, where there's a page written by Erin Hunter, I assuming it's the editor, but she kind of talks about why she talked about Scourge, and she says why we wanted to flesh out his backstory. Also, I'm just noticing this now, they actually didn't change any of the words in it. So in the second paragraph it says a manga novel, which is funny because also they say a Tokyo Pop manga in the side, even though on the cover it's a graphic novel. I don't know. I think it's funny. I also think the discourse between what counts as a manga and a graphic novel is funny because nobody seems to agree, not even the Word Cat's website. Oh, that's a rabbit hole. But yeah, that was The Rise of Scourge. For all intents and purposes, pretty good origin story for Scourge. But what did you think? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Did you think it was a bit underwhelming? Let me know down below. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and have a nice day. See y'all next time. Bye-bye!